The first contact. Commander Thalia Novak stared through the viewport of her rescue vessel as it cut through the debris field surrounding Research Station Omega. The twisted metal fragments of both human and Aetherian ships glinted in the starlight, a graveyard of technological advancement gone wrong. Her mission was simple: search for survivors after the devastating attack on humanity's foremost research facility. Life signs detected in Section Delta. Commander, Lieutenant Reed reported from his station, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Faint, but steady. Thalia nodded, adjusting her tactical suit's environmental controls. Keep the engines cold, Reed. We don't want to attract any lingering Aetherian patrols. The war had been raging for 3 years now, ever since the crystalline beings emerged from the Vega sector. Their intentions unclear, but their actions hostile. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss as Thalia entered the ruined station. Emergency lights cast eerie red shadows across the corridors, and the artificial gravity fluctuated with each step. Her suit's sensors picked up traces of exotic particles, the aftermath of Aetherian quantum weapons. Commander, Reed's voice crackled through her comm. The life sign is moving. 20 meters ahead, Research Lab 3. Thalia raised her pulse rifle, its familiar weight offering little comfort in the ghostly silence. As she approached the lab, she heard something unusual, a soft, melodic humming that seemed to resonate with the station's metal walls. The lab's reinforced door was partially melted, creating a gap just large enough to squeeze through. Inside, amidst scattered research equipment and shattered containment units, Thalia found the source of both the humming and the life sign. An Aetherian lay trapped beneath a fallen beam, its crystalline form radiating pulses of pale blue light. Unlike the warriors Thalia had encountered in battle, this one was smaller, with delicate lattices of transparent crystal forming what appeared to be scientific instruments grown from its own body. The alien's eyes, geometric patterns of light within faceted crystal, focused on Thalia. Instead of the expected hostility, she saw something different: fear, pain, and hope. "Please," the Aetherian spoke, its voice translating directly into Thalia's mind through some unknown mechanism. "I am not a warrior. I am Zirith, researcher of peace." Thalia kept her rifle trained on the alien, years of combat experience warring with her instincts as a rescue operator. "Why should I believe you? Your kind has shown nothing but aggression since first contact." Zirith's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "Because I can prove that this war is based on a terrible mistake. My research, my findings." A spasm of pain interrupted her words as the beam shifted, causing crystal fragments to scatter across the floor. The tactical part of Thalia's mind screamed at her to retreat, to report the enemy presence. But something in Zirith's voice, in the way her crystal structure resonated with obvious pain and desperation, reached past Thalia's training. "If I help you," Thalia said slowly, lowering her rifle, "you'll share everything you know. No tricks. On my core resonance, I swear it." Zirith's words carried a weight that Thalia felt in her bones. Among Aetherians, such an oath was unbreakable. Using her suit's enhanced strength, Thalia carefully lifted the beam. Zirith slid free, her crystalline body reconfiguring itself to minimize damage. The alien scientist was injured but mobile, her internal light flickering but stable. "Commander," Reed's voice returned. "Aetherian patrol ships detected entering the sector. We need to move." Thalia looked at Zirith, making a decision that would alter the course of 2 civilizations. "Can you move? My ship is near." "Yes, but..." Zirith's light patterns shifted in what Thalia would later learn was confusion. "You would take me with you, against your orders." "I'm a rescue operator first, soldier second," Thalia replied, helping the alien to her feet. "And something tells me you're the key to ending this war before it destroys both our species." As they made their way through the station's darkened corridors, Thalia realized she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. But watching Xyrith's determined movements, seeing the way the alien scientist clutched a small data crystal close to her core, Felia knew some risks were worth taking. What neither of them realized was that this moment, this choice between duty and compassion, would become the catalyst for changes beyond their imagining. The war that had seemed endless was about to take an unexpected turn, all because one human commander chose to listen instead of shoot. Bridge between worlds. The abandoned mining outpost on Europa wasn't much, but it was the only safe place Felia could think of. Ice storms howled outside the reinforced walls as she helped Xyrith into the facility's makeshift laboratory. Lieutenant Reed had reluctantly agreed to report their rescue ship lost in the debris field, buying them precious time. "Your temperature controls are holding?" Felia asked, watching as Xyrith's crystalline form adapted to the environment. The Aetherian scientist had explained that her people normally existed in much colder conditions. Yes, Xyrith's mental voice was clearer now that they were away from the chaos of the research station. "Your engineering is surprisingly elegant, despite its simplicity." The aliens' light patterns shifted in what Felia was beginning to recognize as appreciation. "Tell that to our military command. They think we're decades behind your quantum technology." Felia began setting up the emergency power cells, creating a stable energy grid for their hideout. Xyrith moved to a clear space in the lab, her crystalline form humming softly. With careful precision, she extracted the data crystal she'd saved from the station. As it activated, holographic symbols filled the air around them. "This is what I discovered," Xyrith explained, manipulating the symbols with pulses of light from her form. 3 years ago, when our first ships entered your solar system, we detected something extraordinary. Patterns in your communication networks that exactly matched our ancient texts." Felia leaned closer, fascinated despite her lingering caution. "What kind of patterns?" "What we believe to be messages from the predecessors, a species that seeded the galaxy with knowledge before vanishing." Xyrith's light dimmed with sadness. "Our Council of Resonance interpreted these patterns as warnings about humanity's violent nature. They believed you had somehow corrupted the predecessors' legacy." "But that's not what they were, was it?" Felia felt her heart rate quicken as pieces began falling into place. "No." Xyrith projected new images. Human internet protocols side by side with crystalline patterns. Your species independently developed communication systems that mirrored the predecessors' mathematics. It wasn't corruption, it was convergent evolution. Proof that both our species think in compatible ways. The implications hit Felia like a plasma burst. So this entire war is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Xyrith's form pulsed with urgency, but the Council refuses to consider this interpretation. They believe acknowledging this would destabilize our entire society. A warning alarm cut through their conversation. Felia rushed to the security console, her blood running cold at what she saw. "We've got company. 3 human patrol ships in orbit. They cannot find us." Xyrith's light patterns became erratic with fear. "If either side discovers this truth before we can prove it conclusively." Felia was already moving, activating the outpost's camouflage systems. "We need help. Someone who can verify your findings independently." She paused, an idea forming. "I know someone. Dr. Rashid at the Lunar Observatory. She's been studying your species' communications since first contact." "Can she be trusted?" Xyrith asked, her crystalline form condensing defensively. "She's a scientist first, like you. And she's been arguing against military escalation since the war began." Felia began encrypting a message on her personal channel. "But getting to her won't be easy. Every military ship in the system is looking for us by now." Xyrith moved closer, her presence causing the air to tingle with quantum energy. "Perhaps we don't need a ship." Her form began to resonate at a new frequency, creating complex geometric patterns in the air. "My people developed ways to travel through quantum space for short distances. With your station's power grid, I might be able to adapt the technique." Felia stared at her alien companion with newfound respect. You'd share that technology with me, even though we're technically enemies. You saved my life. Xyrith's mental voice carried warmth that transcended species. More importantly, you listened when others would have shot first. If we cannot trust each other with our knowledge, how can we expect our peoples to find peace? The patrol ships were getting closer, their scanning beams sweeping the moon's surface. Thalia made her decision. All right, show me what you need for this quantum jump. But first, she pulled up the outpost communication array. I need to send a message to some people I trust. If we're going to change things, we'll need more allies. As Thalia composed her message, she watched Xyrith begin modifying the power systems with graceful precision. Human and Aetherian working together, sharing knowledge freely. It was everything the politicians and military leaders claimed was impossible. Yet here they were, building a bridge between worlds in an abandoned outpost on a frozen moon. The war that had seemed so simple, so clearly defined by lines of us and them, was revealing itself to be built on layers of misunderstanding and fear. But with each passing moment, as Thalia learned more about Xyrith's people and shared her own species' perspective, those lines began to blur. They had taken the first steps towards something revolutionary. Now they just had to survive long enough to share it with others who would listen. Underground Alliance. The Lunar Observatory's backup generator room wasn't designed for clandestine meetings, but it served their purpose. Dr. Rashid adjusted her glasses as she studied the holographic data floating between them, her dark eyes wide with wonder. The mathematical correlation is undeniable, she whispered, tracing patterns in the air. Your quantum communications and our digital protocols. They're like different dialects of the same language. Xyrith's crystalline form glowed with approval. Then you understand why this must be shared. Understanding is one thing, Lieutenant Reed interjected from his position by the door. Getting anyone to listen is another. He'd been skeptical when Thalia first contacted him, but seeing Xyrith's evidence had convinced him to join their cause. Thalia watched the security feeds, alert for any sign of discovery. The quantum jump from Europa had worked, but it had left them all drained. We need more allies, people in positions to influence both sides. I might know someone, Dr. Rashid said, pulling up encrypted files on her tablet. There's an Aetherian cultural attaché who was stationed on Earth before the war. She refused to leave when hostilities broke out, claiming diplomatic immunity. The military's been keeping her under observation. Lyra. Xyrith's light patterns shifted in recognition. She was my mentor at the Institute of Harmonics, if she's still here. A soft chime from Dr. Rashid's computer interrupted them. Incoming transmission from the Perseus Deep Space Array. It's Professor Hammond. He says it's urgent. The holographic display flickered, revealing the weathered face of one of Earth's leading xenorchaeologists. Rashid, thank God. You need to see this. His image was replaced by footage from an orbital probe. We just discovered these ruins on Mars' southern ice cap. They're older than anything we found before. The footage showed crystalline structures emerging from the ice, their geometric patterns hauntingly familiar. Xyrith moved closer to the display, her form resonating with intense emotion. Those are predecessor artifacts, she breathed. But how? We believe their influence never reached this system. That's not all, Hammond continued. The structures are generating energy signatures. They're still active after all this time. Thalia felt the pieces clicking together. The patterns in our communications, they weren't just similar to the predecessors' mathematics. We built our networks on top of their remnant signals without even knowing it. A quantum echo, Xyrith agreed, her light pulsing with excitement. Your species instinctively tapped into the predecessor's communication grid. That's why our council detected their signatures in your transmissions. Dr. Rashid was already compiling the data. This changes everything. With physical proof of the predecessor's presence in our system, we need to get to those ruins, Thalia decided. But we'll need help from both sides. Doctor, can you arrange a meeting with the Aetherian attaché? Already working on it, but we'll need a secure location. Reed stepped forward. I know a place. Old emergency bunker beneath New Geneva. It's off both military and civilian grids. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of careful planning and encrypted messages. Their small group grew cautiously, adding only those they could absolutely trust. A human quantum physicist who'd been corresponding secretly with Etherian researchers. A military chaplain who'd been advocating for peaceful contact. Each new ally brought skills and connections they desperately needed. When they finally gathered in the Geneva bunker, Philia was struck by the sight. Humans and Etherians working side by side, sharing knowledge freely. The Etherian attaché, Lyra, proved to be as open-minded as they'd hoped, her crystalline form more elaborate than Xyrith's, but radiating the same commitment to understanding. The Council was wrong about humans, Lyra announced after reviewing their evidence, but they will resist accepting this truth. Change comes slowly to my people. Same with humans, Reed muttered. Especially military and political leaders with careers built on fighting this war. Then we don't approach the leaders first, Philia suggested, an idea taking shape. We take this directly to both populations. The Mars ruins are proof that our species are connected by something greater than our differences. A joint expedition, Dr. Rashid added, catching on. Human and Etherian scientists working together to unlock the predecessor's secrets. It would be dangerous, Xyrith cautioned. Both sides would try to stop us, which is why we need to build our network first, Philia replied. Gather more allies, prepare contingency plans. We're not just planning a scientific mission, we're starting a movement. As their allies discussed logistics and security measures, Philia watched Xyrith working with Dr. Rashid to decode more of the predecessor signals. The Etherian scientist had come so far from their first meeting in the ruined research station. They all had. What had started as a desperate attempt to save one life had grown into something far greater, a chance to save both their species from a war built on misunderstanding. The path ahead was dangerous, but looking around the room at their growing alliance, Philia felt something she hadn't experienced since the war began. Hope. They were building more than just a bridge between worlds now. They were creating a future where understanding replaced fear, where different species could learn from each other instead of fighting. It wouldn't be easy, but as she caught Xyrith's glowing gaze across the room, Philia knew it would be worth every risk. The truth revealed. The Martian storm raged outside the excavation dome, red dust reducing visibility to mere meters. Inside, surrounded by humming equipment and glowing predecessor artifacts, Philia watched as Xyrith interfaced with an ancient crystal matrix. The joint expedition had made it to the ruins, but time was running out. Multiple ships dropping out of orbit, Reed's voice crackled through the comm. Both human and Etherian signatures. Looks like someone talked. Dr. Rashid worked frantically at her station, correlating data streams. We need more time. The quantum resonance patterns are still stabilizing. Time is something we don't have, Lyra observed, her crystalline form shifting anxiously. The Etherian attaché had risked everything to help them reach the ruins. Both fleets will have detected our power signature by now. Philia moved to the communication array they'd set up. Their underground network had grown larger than she'd ever imagined. Scientists, soldiers, diplomats, and civilians from both species who believed in their cause. Now it was time to use it. This is Commander Novak to all Allied channels, she broadcast. Execute Protocol Horizon. I repeat, Protocol Horizon is now active. Across the solar system, their supporters began moving. Quantum encryption keys were released to independent media outlets. Research data was uploaded to public networks. The truth about the predecessor signals, the mathematical correlations, everything they'd discovered, it all went live simultaneously on both human and Etherian information channels. Energy spike. Dr. Rashid called out. The matrix is responding to Xyrith's interface. The ancient crystal structures throughout the ruins pulsed with light, creating geometric patterns that stretched to the dome's ceiling. Xyrith's form resonated in harmony with them, her mental voice strained but determined. "The predecessors left more than just mathematics," she announced. "They left a message for both our species." The patterns coalesced into a holographic display that filled the chamber. Thalia watched in awe as images formed. Two young species, different but alike, each carrying pieces of the predecessor's legacy. The message was clear. They were meant to find each other, to learn from each other, to grow together. Multiple targets painting the dome, Reed warned. "They're preparing to fire." But before any shots could be fired, new voices filled the communication channels. From the human fleet, Admiral Blake, one of their secret allies, spoke first. "This is a scientific expedition under my authority. All vessels will stand down." He was followed by the resonant tones of Aetherian High Sage Nexus. "The Council of Resonance demands these ruins be preserved for study. No aggressive action is permitted." Thalia allowed herself a small smile. Their network had reached higher than their enemies had suspected. As more leaders and authorities spoke up, demanding explanations and presenting evidence, the tension in orbit began to shift from military confrontation to scientific curiosity. "Multiple ships are powering down weapons," Reed reported, relief evident in his voice. They're launching shuttles. Research vessels from both sides." The dome's entrance cycled open, admitting a mix of human and Aetherian officials. They moved cautiously at first, but the sight of the ancient holograms and the obvious cooperation between the species already present gave them pause. Professor Hammond stepped forward, addressing both groups. "What you're seeing is proof that our species were never meant to be enemies. The predecessors encoded this knowledge into the very foundations of our civilizations, waiting for us to be ready to understand it." "The quantum resonance patterns in human communication networks," Zyrith added, her form still connected to the matrix. "They weren't corruption or theft of predecessor technology. They were guideposts leading us to each other." Thalia watched as human scientists began working alongside Aetherian researchers, their initial wariness giving way to professional curiosity and then genuine collaboration. The ruins had become more than just an archaeological site. They were becoming the bridge between civilizations they were always meant to be. Dr. Rashid approached her, tablet in hand. "Messages coming in from Earth and the Aetherian homeworld. The data we released. It's causing quite a stir. People are asking questions, demanding answers." "The Council cannot ignore this evidence," Lyra declared, her crystalline form glowing with what Thalia now recognized as satisfaction. "Nor can your military continue to justify the war." "There will be resistance," Thalia acknowledged. 3 years of conflict won't end overnight. But this, she gestured to the humans and Aetherians working together around them, "this is just the beginning." The Martian storm outside began to clear, red dust giving way to stars. Somewhere up there, the combined fleets of two species were receiving orders to stand down, to reassess, to consider possibilities they'd never imagined before. Zyrith finally disconnected from the Matrix, moving to Thalia's side. "The predecessors believed that true strength comes from unity and diversity. They saw that potential in both our species. And now everyone else will see it too," Thalia replied, watching as the future they'd fought so hard for began to take shape around them. A new dawn. 1 year after the Mars revelation, the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station offered a perfect view of Earth and its first permanent Aetherian embassy. Thalia stood at the viewport, watching crystalline ships dock alongside human vessels, their crews mingling with a familiarity that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "The latest data from the joint research team looks promising," Zyrith said, approaching the viewport. Her crystalline form had evolved over the past year, incorporating delicate patterns that reflected her deeper understanding of human culture. "The predecessor technology is already helping us develop new methods of sustainable energy production. And the quantum communication network is revolutionizing our space exploration capabilities," Thalia added. She traded her military uniform for the insignia of the newly formed Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. though I hear some of the old guard are still grumbling about sharing technology. Change comes slowly, Dr. Rashid commented, joining them with her ever-present tablet. But it comes. The latest surveys show over 70% support for continued cooperation among both populations. The station's quantum alerts chimed softly, announcing the arrival of more delegates for the day's ceremony. Lyra emerged from a transport beam, her elaborate crystalline form now bearing the markings of an Aetherian High Council member. "The Council of Resonance sends their regards," she announced, her mental voice carrying warm harmonics, "and their formal approval for the next phase of the Mars excavation." Lieutenant Reed, now Captain Reed, arrived through a more conventional airlock. "The Earth Defense Force has approved the joint security protocols. We'll have mixed crews on all research vessels starting next month." Philia smiled, remembering the desperate days when their alliance consisted of just a handful of believers hiding in an abandoned outpost. Now they were implementing changes that would reshape both civilizations. The main observation hall filled with representatives from both species. Professor Hammond was demonstrating a new translation matrix to a group of fascinated Aetherian scientists. Admiral Blake chatted with members of the Aetherian Fleet Command about shared patrol responsibilities. Even the children of both species had their own cultural exchange program, human kids learning quantum harmonics while young Aetherians studied Earth's diverse ecosystems. Commander Novak, a junior officer, called out, "They're ready for you in the ceremony chamber." Philia nodded, straightening her uniform. Today they would officially inaugurate the first joint academy for human and Aetherian officers. It was another step toward ensuring the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve would last. "I remember when you first found me in that ruined research station," Zyrith said quietly as they walked together. "I was certain you would shoot first and never question why. And I thought all Aetherians were bent on humanity's destruction." Philia replied. "We were both trapped by our assumptions." The ceremony chamber was packed with graduates, human and Aetherian cadets who had trained together, learned from each other, and forged bonds that transcended their biological differences. As Philia took the podium, she saw not two separate species, but the future the predecessors had envisioned. "1 year ago," she began, her voice carrying across the chamber, "we discovered that our differences were never meant to divide us. They were meant to complement each other, to push us toward greater understanding. The predecessors didn't leave us a legacy of separation, but a challenge to grow beyond our limited perspectives." She gestured to the viewport, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the black of space. "This academy represents more than just military cooperation. It represents our commitment to exploring the galaxy together, to facing its challenges united rather than divided. Each of you graduating today carries that vision forward." Zyrith moved to join her at the podium, their historic partnership now a symbol of what was possible. "Our species have only begun to discover what we can achieve together. The predecessor ruins on Mars were just the first step. There are more mysteries waiting for us among the stars, more opportunities to learn from each other." The ceremony concluded with a display of synchronized quantum harmonics, human technology, and Aetherian abilities combining to create something entirely new and beautiful. As the lights played across the chamber, Philia caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd. Dr. Rashid deep in discussion with an Aetherian physicist, Reed showing a crystalline cadet how to optimize their combat stance, Lyra teaching human diplomats the subtleties of quantum resonance communication. Later, as the celebration wound down, Philia found herself back at the viewport with Zyrith. "Did you ever imagine, when you were working on your research, that it would lead to all this?" "I hoped," Zyrith admitted, her form glowing softly. "But hope without action is meaningless. It took your courage to save an enemy, your willingness to listen, to turn that hope into reality." Together they watched as another mixed crew of human and Aetherian scientists departed for Mars, ready to uncover more of the predecessor's secrets. But the real miracle wasn't in the ancient ruins or the advanced technology. It was in the simple truth that two species, once divided by fear and misunderstanding, had found the wisdom to choose a better path. The war that had threatened to destroy them both had instead forced them to grow, to reach beyond their prejudices, and discover that the greatest strength lies not in isolation, but in the bridges built between different worlds.